Welcome to Left-Handed Lock Sport. I'm the EJM3, and today for video 19, we're going to be tackling the best SFIC cores. Stick around. So this is the first video of 4 that I plan to do on the SFIC cores. In this first one, we're going to overview the parts, the keys, the different systems, how to gut without any special tools, and how to reassemble it without any special tools. In the second video, we are going to be cutting keys. So if you're like me and you bought some cores off of eBay and they only came with an operating key and not the control key, we will cut one of each so we have a fully operational SFIC core, along with how these different pins interact with the 2 shear lines. In the third one, we are going to be creating a custom control sleeve tensioner so we can pick just to the control and ignore the operating shear line. And finally, we are going to use that tool to pick one of these guys. So let's start off with the different parts. So we have our ABUS 83 right here that we'll be using as a comparison. This has a standard shell in it. It has a key that you're used to. It has a plug, and it all fits in this shell. Generally, the plug is held into place with a clip, and it, on the back of the shell, has some sort of cam actuator that interacts with the back of the lock here to open up the shackle. This whole thing is generally held in place with some sort of screw that you see here. And that screw is put into the back of the shell through a hole in the lock body that's in the bottom of the shackle. So this is what you're used to, but how does it differ from our SFIC? So we still have a key, we still have a plug, and we even still have the clip that holds the plug in place. But we have an additional part, and that is called the control sleeve. And on the control sleeve is this control lug that protrudes out of the shell and into a groove that's milled into the plug. And that you can see right here. So when you have the control key, you can operate this secondary shear line to move the lug in and out. Once you want to change an SFIC core from a lock, you put the control key in, turn it, which pushes that in, and then the whole thing can come out. Then you can change your locks, put it in, turn the control key, and the control lug pops back out, holding the lock securely inside the lock body for normal operation. So that is basically it, except for the cam actuator. This one does not have one. Instead, it has these throw pin holes that interact with 2 throw pins inside of the lock. Once we put our operating key in, it turns just the operating shear line, which is on the top of this. So let's take this control sleeve out. This is the control sleeve shear line here, and there's a gap between the 2 shear lines. So when you have the operating shear line, just the plug rotates and this stays put. When it rotates inside of the lock, then the throw pins rotate 90 degrees, and those are attached to a cam just like our regular lock, which opens up the shackle. So that is it for the lock body parts. Let's talk about what's in the chamber themselves. Alright, so let's look inside the chamber. Over here on the far left is our standard lock. You have a spring sitting on top of a driver pin that pushes down a key pin. When a key is inserted, the driver pin sits in the Bible and the key pin sits in the plug. The key pin has a rounded off bottom that rides along the bitting of the key when the key is inserted and pulled out. So this is what an SFIC core looks like. From top to bottom, you have the cap, which you can see from an undismantled SFIC core. It's those brass round things right there on top. And right below that is the spring, followed by a driver pin, or what's called the top pin, control pin, the master pin, and finally the key pin, or the bottom pin. The bottom pin is made out of a silver alloy, which gives it a little bit more durability than the standard brass and holds up to wear and tear a little bit better. Other than that, then these are basically the same. We have more top pins in this one than just the standard driver to interact with the two different shear lines, and also most SFICs that you'll come across are mastered. So this is pretty standard from what you will find if you buy your lock off of eBay. So these two over here is all the pins stacked up on top of each other. And hopefully you can see this, but they are the exact same length. This is not by accident. This is part of the best systems that we will go over next. Each one of these four, you can choose any length. So just as long as all four add up to the same overall length. And we'll get into that next, right after we talk about the keys. So we have all of our keys here. This is the standard plug that came in the 83, and this is the key that came with it once I got it from the locksmith. So as you can see, there are 5 different cuts on this key, and it's a standard Schlage keyway. This key has these 2 shoulders right here that act as a depth stop, so when you put it into the face of the key and it hits, then we know that all of these cuts line up with all of the different chambers. So as you can see, there's only 5 here, but we have 6 chambers. So I went out and bought a slightly longer key. So from the length of this tip to the shoulder is slightly longer, so I could get a 6th key or 6th chamber filled. So if we put these two on top of each other, you'll notice that the 6th key is slightly longer than the 5-chamber key. This is not the case when we move over to best systems because they use a tip stop mechanism, which is that little part of the key right there. And that is what stops the key from going any deeper than it needs to. So when you're dealing with 7 chambers here or 6 chambers here, the key lengths are both identical. The only difference is that you have to remember that because it's tip stop, then the chamber all the way in the back is considered the first chamber, where on a standard plug, the one closest to the front is the first chamber. So now let's talk about keyways. If you're lucky enough to get a key that has a letter right here on the back towards the bottom, then you don't need to worry about trying to match up your specific lock with a keyway. All you need to order is a blank that has the same letter. If you got a lock like this one, without a letter here, then you're going to be squinting at the graphic that's going to be appearing on the screen right now. These are all silhouettes of different types of keyways. So if you need to buy a blank, then you're going to be squinting at this for a very long time. But if you want some help, check out the comments below, and you'll see a link to a Lockpicking 101 thread where people took pictures of the front of their locks and assigned letters to it. It is extremely helpful when you have a real-life picture to compare your lock to against those silhouettes. So with that said, let's move on to the different type of systems that you can find in the SFICs. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing. There's a lot of math involved, so please stick with me. So there's typically 3 different types of systems, the A2, the A3, and the A4. The difference between each one of them is the size increments between the pins. So in the A2 system, there's 12.5 thousandths increments between one pin to the next The A3 is 18 thousandths and the A4 is 21 thousandths. So each of these pins correspond to a number, and when you add up all the numbers in a pin stack, it must equal a total number. So to clarify, let's talk about the A2 system first. The total length needs to be equal to 23. So here's a list of all of the A2 key pin lengths on your screen here. There are 10 different pins that range from 0 to 9, ranging from 110 thousandths of an inch to 222 thousandths. And here is a chart of all the top pin lengths. There are 18 in total, ranging from 2 to 19. And that goes all the way from 25 thousandths all the way to 238 thousandths. So finally, the key cut depths. The space between each of the cuts in all of these systems is 150 thousandths from the center of one cut to the next. And the first cut is located 80 thousandths from the notch stop in the point of the key to the center of that cut. So the A2 system has 10 cut depths that go from a 0 bitted, which is 318 thousandths, to a 9 bitted, which is 205 thousandths. Okay, so let's move on to the A3. The total length of this one needs to be equal to 16. And here's a chart of the key pin lengths, the top pin lengths, and the key cut depths of the A3 system. And the A4 system, the total length needs of each pin stack needs to be equal to 14. And here's a similar chart of the key pin lengths, the top pin lengths, and the key cut depths for the A4 system. Okay, now let's move on to how to gut and reassemble without the need of any special tools. Alright, so I have my drill press vise all ready to go. This is my best SFIC core. And just a fair warning before we do this, if you plan on doing this often, you might want to buy yourself an assembly block like the one you see on your screen. It makes this process a lot easier, but if this is a one-off, then we can just do it with a piece of cardboard and a little piece of a marker flag. You can get marker flags from the hardware store for fairly cheap. These are the flags that landscapers use to mark off gas lines and stuff underneath the ground. So you put your piece of cardboard right there, and that acts as a little bit of sponge material. Turn your core upside down and throw it into the vise. So you can use your marker flag metal and just put it right into the top of the core there. You'll know when you got it right when you feel the spring compress, as you can see here. And all we need to do is give it some light taps with a hammer. And I felt it jump down, so I think we're in the right spot. So all you need to do is take it out, put your finger underneath it, turn it around. You should see that cap floating right there on top. You can take the cap, pull it off, and you now have access to the chamber. So fair warning again, before you gut this thing, then you have to know that these are very, very tiny. So taking them out in some sort of controlled fashion is key. So I'm going to remove my vise there and just try to take this spring out carefully. There we go. So your spring might compress a little bit, but with careful work at the end, we can uncompress that thing back to its regular size. So then if you just give it a little bit of a tap, you can see our first pin come out. There we go. And let's get our second one. Our second one is extremely small. Little tiny wafer there. Our third one, a little camera shy, so I'm going to use a pick and place it right down into chamber 1, or chamber 7 rather. And we get our third top pin. And finally, we get our bottom pin there. So that's how you disassemble. Now let's reassemble it. Reassembly is fairly straightforward. You want to throw in each one of the pins one by one back into the chamber. Going from the top down. So first we have our key pin. Then we have our first top pin. Then we have our tiny little guy. Right there. And I'm just going to look into this off camera just to make sure that it is flat, and it is. The small ones can go vertical, so you got to make sure that that doesn't happen. And finally, our last of the top pins. And I'm going to work on the spring a little bit. Probably going to fast forward through this. Alright, so we got our spring a little less compact. And we can toss that right onto the top here. There we go. Now I'm going to get the vise back out. Now we're going to get our cap and put it right above the spring. And just with finger pressure, we're going to hold that down to the chamber. And try to get it as even on the top as we can, like so. And just give it a few taps. And there you have it. We are now reassembled. So you're just going to make sure that when you're tapping these into place, you don't go too far, because these caps can go all the way down. So just make sure that you leave it at about a tiny little lip at the top, similar to the rest of them. And if we look inside of the keyway, we got our key pin. And let me just push this up. And I'm feeling some spring tension on the back. So it seems as though it's working well to get the key in there, and it still unlocks with the operating key. So that is it. That's how you disassemble and reassemble an SFIC core without any special tools other than a vise and a snapped off piece of metal rod that you can get at the hardware store. So that is it. That is the SFIC core. Everything I know about it, all the parts, all of the chambers, the sleeve, the keys, the systems, and all of that fun stuff. So next time we'll be taking care of some of these blanks and making them into working keys, so I can finally get a control key for some of the cores that I got. So I hope you liked this video. I hope you liked the series. If you do, please click like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you can get updated when I start cutting these keys. If you have any comments, please post them down below. And until next time, peace.